offering my advice because I don't know. I don't know what it's like to be social media, Instagram this. I don't know what it's like to be bombarded and have to be the breadwinner in the family.
One moment. One sentence. One truth detonated like an explosion across the entire basketball universe. And Cheryl Miller stood at the center of it, unshaken, unapologetic, and finally saying out loud what millions whispered for months. From the instant her voice cut through the noise, everything shifted. Because Cheryl didn't speak like a retired legend giving commentary, she spoke like a witness tired of watching a young superstar get dragged through politics disguised as basketball. She drew a line so sharp it split the entire narrative open. Team USA never intended to let Caitlin Clark rise the way her talent demanded. And the moment that reality spilled out of Cheryl's mouth, the entire sports world combusted. Fans who spent a year watching Clark transform arenas into sold-out temples of energy suddenly felt validated. Parents who saw their kids wearing number 22 shirts like it was a superhero emblem understood they weren't imagining the cold shoulders, the awkward rotations, the weirdly timed benchings, the so-called accidental elbows and the unintentional shoves. They were watching a pattern, and Cheryl confirmed that pattern existed long before Clark ever set foot near Team USA. She said it wasn't subtle, wasn't mysterious, wasn't a misunderstanding. It was structural. It was cultural. It was political. Cheryl made it clear that Caitlin Clark didn't fit the system because she didn't come from the system. She wasn't molded by the old guard, wasn't shaped in their pipeline, wasn't built in their circles. She came from Iowa with a fan base so massive it eclipsed players who spent a decade trying to break through the media wall. Clark didn't ask permission, she didn't wait for validation, she didn't play small to appease egos. She played the game at a level that revived women's basketball with a single draft selection. And because she did
and be a brand and be worried about what I do or say and everything else, and 24/7 being pulled in so many different directions and not knowing, and then throwing the fact that if I'm insecure.
The blueprint pushed back. Cheryl explained that the higher-ups viewed Clark's spotlight as a disruption, not a blessing. They saw the ratings spike not as a shared victory but as a threat to the hierarchy. They saw her confidence not as leadership but as imbalance. They saw her drawing more attention than the veterans not as growth but as danger. Instead of embracing the new era Clark created, they chose to protect the old one. And the evidence? It was everywhere. The cold body language on the court. The clips circulating online were reactions to Clark's plays looked more annoyed than supportive, the questionable substitution patterns that made analysts pause mid-sentence. The heavy fouls met with silence from officials. The commentary that praised others for toughness but criticized Clark for the same energy. It all culminated in Cheryl's most cutting statement, "Caitlin Clark changed basketball, and that is exactly why they fear her." Those words didn't just echo, they detonated. Because fans felt that fear from day one. They saw the pushback whenever Clark outshined entire teams. They saw the discomfort when she generated more attention than an entire league's worth of marketing. They felt the tension when she broke record after record, carrying arenas on her back while being treated like she was an outsider sneaking into a room she actually built a new door for. And Cheryl didn't stop there. She explained that every time the sport produces a young force capable of shifting power, the system deploys subtle resistance. Caitlin wasn't just good, she was revolutionary. Her passes, her range, her vision, her pace, they weren't normal. They were global. And global is not something Team USA wanted to hand the keys to a 22-year-old rookie who wasn't part of their traditional hierarchy. Yet Clark kept climbing. Every crowd exploding three, every viral assist, every night she broke another attendance record, she climbed. And the higher she climbed, the more the
Pure. If I've got my own mental issues going on, who do I talk to? I don't regret being born when I was.
Right.
I'm in the right place at the right.
Backlash grew. Fans could see it in real time, the way certain commentators nitpicked, the way narratives shifted from admiration to scrutiny the moment her popularity threatened to eclipse veteran legacies. Cheryl said it plainly, Clark was punished for being impact fell. She didn't fit the predetermined mold, so the mold tried to contain her. But nothing contains a player whose talent reshapes the geometry of basketball. And whether she wore 22 or 17, whether she was benched or elevated, whether she was embraced or resisted, one truth became undeniable after Cheryl spoke: Caitlin Clark wasn't being protected, she was being managed. Controlled. Softened. Reduced. Not because she wasn't good enough, but because she was too good, too fast, too influential, too early. And that reality rewired the entire conversation about Team USA, about politics and sports, and about the unstoppable storm named Caitlin Clark. The real shock wasn't that Cheryl Miller finally told the truth. The real shock was how perfectly her words explained every painful, confusing moment fans spent months arguing about. Because the second she broke the silence, everything suddenly made sense. The weird rotations, the questionable officiating, the PR spin, the narrative policing, and the strange refusal to celebrate the most electrifying rookie the sport has ever seen. Cheryl revealed what millions felt but couldn't prove, that Team USA's internal world was divided long before the roster talks, long before the injuries, long before the headlines. There were coaches who wanted Clark. Coaches who believed her vision and long-range gravity could open up a new era of global dominance. And then there were coaches who didn't want the shift, didn't want the noise, didn't want the spotlight to move away from familiar faces. There were executives who saw dollar signs in her presence and others who felt overshadowed by the buzz she brought. There were players eager to play with her creativity and others who...
It's just been fascinating to watch these young ladies come up and now take the baton and take it to a different level.
She handled it in a graceful way as well.
Quietly worried what it meant for their roles once the cameras locked onto Clark the way they always do, relentlessly, magnetically, inevitably. This internal split didn't create tension, it revealed the tension that was already there. Caitlin Clark wasn't dividing the sport, she was exposing divisions that existed long before she arrived. And Cheryl broke down the layers with precision: the loyalty politics, the veteran bias, the protect the old guard mentality, the fear of a rookie being crowned the face of the team before her first Olympics. Cheryl emphasized that Team USA, unlike the WNBA, carries even more political weight: selection committees, historical legacies, coaching philosophies, endorsement considerations, and the optics of leadership. Within that machinery, Clark wasn't seen as the future, she was seen as the disruption. A young player who would instantly change how the world watched Team USA, whose presence would attract a level of attention some veterans had never received even after a decade of excellence. That imbalance, Cheryl said, created quiet resistance. Not hatred, resistance. Not jealousy, caution. Not sabotage, control, and nothing embodied that control more clearly than the number change situation. Instead of handling it with transparency and respect, it became a public storyline that painted Clark as the problem without her ever saying a single word. Cheryl stated that Team USA mishandled the optics completely, making it seem like Clark was demanding special treatment when she wasn't even talking. Fans saw this and snapped. They weren't reacting to a number. They were reacting to a pattern where Clark was consistently portrayed as the one causing issues despite her reputation for humility, professionalism, and respect for the game. And every time fans tried to defend her, critics responded with narratives designed to minimize her impact or dismiss her influence. Cheryl said this wasn't about a jersey. It was about messaging. About sending a subtle signal: you are not the center here, no matter how big you are out there. But that message collided with a reality Team USA couldn't avoid. Clark was already the center. The center of attention. The center of conversation. The center of global interest. She didn't choose that position, the world put her there. And Cheryl highlighted that the very people trying to control the narrative were the same ones benefiting from the attention Clark generated. Networks. Sponsors. Media pages. The sport itself. Everyone gained from Caitlin, yet she was still the one asked to shrink herself. Still the one asked to adjust. Still the one asked to wait her turn. But Clark didn't ask for a turn. She earned it. Night after night, city after city. And when the groin injury took her out of action, fans mourned not just the absence of her presence, they mourned the season-long frustration that she never got the respect she deserved from the people who needed her the most. Cheryl summed it up with devastating clarity. You don't treat the most impactful young player in basketball like this unless you're trying to send a message. And that message now hangs over every conversation about Team USA's future, because the world has seen too much to pretend anymore. The moment Cheryl Miller said the quiet part out loud, the entire season snapped into focus. Every shove, every hard foul, every cold exchange, every uncomfortable silence suddenly lined up like pieces of a puzzle fans never wanted to solve. Because Cheryl didn't just describe what happened, she described why it happened. She explained the emotional undertow beneath the surface of a league struggling to reconcile a generational explosion of popularity with the internal politics that weren't ready for it. She broke down the reality that Caitlin Clark was never simply a rookie, she was a lightning strike. A surge of unprecedented attention. A gravitational shift too strong to manage quietly. And while the world embraced that shift, parts of the system resisted it. Not because Clark was undeserving, but because her rise was too sudden, too bright, too consuming. Cheryl described it as a spotlight that swept across the sport faster than the system could adjust. It made some players feel overshadowed, some executives feel exposed, and some decision-makers feel like the balance of the old hierarchy was slipping away. Fans saw this conflict play out in real time. The jarring contrast between Clark's on-court brilliance and the off-court narratives that tried to box her into something smaller. They saw the selective outrage, the selective praise, the selective officiating. They saw moments that made no sense unless you understood the politics Cheryl exposed. They saw Clark become the face of global basketball at 22 while still being portrayed as the outsider. They saw her elevate the sport financially, culturally, socially, and still be treated with hesitation instead of celebration. Cheryl said that Clark's presence alone disrupted years of established expectations, and instead of evolving, parts of the system chose to push back. That pushback wasn't always loud, but it was consistent. It showed up in commentary. It showed up in rotations. It showed up in conversations about respect, toughness, and leadership. It showed up in how differently Clark was talked about compared to other rising stars. Yet despite all of this, Clark kept playing the game at a level that made the noise irrelevant. Every step-back three, every no-look dime, every fourth-quarter surge reminded the world that politics may shape narratives, but they will never shape talent. And Cheryl's voice, strong, steady, legendary, gave fans the validation they didn't know they were searching for. She told them they weren't imagining the frustration, the tension, the patterns. She told them the game was changing because Clark changed it. And change always brings resistance. But resistance is temporary. Talent is permanent. Influence is permanent. Impact is permanent. And the future Cheryl envisioned, a future where the sport grows, where voices get louder, where the next generation gets empowered, is a future built on players like Caitlin Clark, players who don't wait for acceptance to lead the game forward. There comes a moment in every sports era when the truth grows too heavy to hide, and in that moment, the silence snaps, and that's exactly what happened the instant Cheryl Miller said what the entire basketball world had tiptoed around for a year. Because from that very second, everything people suspected, argued about, debated, cried over, and screenshot online suddenly felt real, confirmed, exposed. The tension wasn't imagined. The frustration wasn't fan overreaction. The strange officiating, the awkward body language, the bizarre narrative swings, none of it was coincidence. Cheryl's words didn't just validate the fanbase, they reshaped the entire season retroactively, like someone finally turned on a light in a room that had been kept deliberately dim. And the moment that light hit, fans could finally see the outlines of everything happening behind the curtain. The pressure, the politics, the fear, the power struggles, the protect the old guard mentality, and the uncomfortable truth that Caitlin Clark had become too big for a system that didn't know how to handle her rise without losing control of its hierarchy. Fans watched things that made no sense at the time suddenly fall into sharp focus. every moment when Clark was criticized for behaviors that other players were praised for. Every time she took a heavy shot to the floor and the whistle swallowed its sound. Every headline that framed her confidence as arrogance but framed someone else's arrogance as leadership. Every camera shot where teammates didn't celebrate her buckets with the same enthusiasm she showed for theirs. Every post-game interview that tiptoed around her impact instead of embracing it. Every segment that worked overtime to shift praise away from her. When Cheryl spoke, those moments didn't feel scattered anymore. They clicked together like a storyline that had been hiding in plain sight. And that's why fans reacted with such intensity, because it confirmed the lingering suspicion that Cheryl talked about the fractures behind the scenes, fractures that weren't created by Clark but were revealed by her. The debate within Team USA's internal circles wasn't just about talent, it was about timing, identity, and power. Was the program ready for its face to be a 22-year-old rookie whose exposure surpassed nearly everyone? Was the sport ready for a player whose name alone brought in audiences networks spent decades trying to cultivate? Was the old guard ready to share the spotlight with someone who hadn't paid traditional dues, even if those dues were never part of the rulebook to begin with? These were the questions swirling long before fans ever heard the word snub, long before Clark was assigned number 17, long before the injury, long before the media storms. Cheryl described a clash of eras, not a conflict of players. Clark represented a new wave, faster, louder, bigger, more global, more marketable, more influential. And the old wave, whether consciously or unconsciously, tightened its grip because change is never comfortable, not even when the change benefits the sport. This wasn't jealousy, it was disruption. It wasn't personal, it was structural. It wasn't hatred, it was the instinct to maintain familiar power. And in that environment, Clark wasn't disliked, she was a variable they couldn't fully control. She was too massive, too fast, too unpredictable. You can't